March Forward Girl by Melba Patillo Beals. Narrated by Mr. Townsend, 8th grade ELA, AGW. Chapter 18. Who is Jim Crow? Papa arrived back about 3 p.m. and took a seat in the dining room with us. I could see by his damp eyes, set chin, and steely expression that I was in trouble. Looking at me with a stern stare, he said, "I see, child, that you've had a major lesson in disobeying your parents. Why did you decide that was a good idea? You frightened us to death. We sat up all night praying for you." No, sir, I'll never do it again." I looked down at the floor. I did not look directly into his eyes. Grandma interrupted. "What would it have been like had you never come home? I can't even explain to you. No words can tell you how we felt." "I don't know what you were thinking," Mother said, "at that time of the evening, to take off by yourself. I was so frightened to hear them talking to me that way and to see their drawn and sad faces, and I knew things would be different from now on. Papa said, it's really clear that we must disguise this girl to keep her safe. It's absolutely necessary." At this point, Grandma said, "I think we should give some consideration to the Asian art of binding the chest. That would rid her of one distinct physical characteristic and alter her appearance considerably." Mother responded, "Yes, and we should brush her hair back off her face, pull it back and tuck it under and tie it down so as to take the attention off of her long wavy locks." Papa added, "I'll get her some fake horn-rimmed glasses to wear." At that moment, I wanted to disagree because it all sounded too severe. I wanted to object, but I just asked the question, "Isn't that too much?" I would never get a boy to look at me if they did that. Tears began to seep into my eyes as I thought how I would look to all of my friends. Tears were brimming in Papa's eyes too, and he said, "Look here, girl, the goal is to keep you with us forever." That began my emergence as a new and jury person. It made me more quiet and more submissive. I stopped my social crusade to fit in among the popular students in my class. Something had happened to me during that encounter with the Klan. I knew something even more awful could have happened to me. I also began to understand that the separate water fountains in schools were based on something. It was a system. It was a ratified, agreed upon system. I wondered what might be the reason. I talked to my mother and grandmother, and they began to tell me about Jim Crow. The words were familiar to me because I had heard the phrase in class, though I had paid them little attention at the time. I wanted to learn who Jim Crow was, though. Mother told me to be a true student, you can read what is happening now, but you need to do research into the past to find out more because history always repeats itself. I wanted to find out where the permission came from that allowed them to treat us as badly as they did now. My grandmother told me to look up the Plessy decision. She even offered to drive me to the library. "It's time you understand exactly what is going on so you can help us save your life," Mother said as she opened the doors to get out of the car. Plessy turned out to be a heart-wrenching case about an African-American man named Homer Adolph Plessy, who wanted to take a ride on a train in 1892. He decided to take a seat in a car marked whites only. At that time, the law said that blacks could not sit in the same car as whites, so repeatedly the white folks asked him to get up, but he refused to leave. Homer Plessy was arrested and convicted of violating the Separate Car Act in Louisiana. But Mr. Plessy fought back, hoping to show that the law was unfair. In 1896, the Supreme Court heard his case, but they ruled 8-1 that the separate but equal doctrine was not in violation of his constitutional rights. The court somehow found that the separate but equal law was not in violation of the 13th Amendment to the Constitution, which abolished slavery, or the 14th Amendment, which enforced the absolute equality between the races before the law. Justice Henry Brown explained that separate but equal was just fine. White people felt equal, after all, so why should black people feel any different? Ultimately, in the Plessy versus Ferguson hearing, the court ruled in favor of the Jim Crow laws. When I read that, I thought to myself, what are the Jim Crow laws? I went to the library at the Baptist College and asked the librarian about the Jim Crow laws. She directed me to a book, which I checked out. The book said that the Jim Crow laws, which had been in effect since the 1880s, divided whites and blacks into two separate worlds. I was astonished to find that there were real laws set up to justify mistreating us. Those laws said whites and blacks should be separated in all public places: drinking fountains, parks, trains, buses, downtown food counters, and public schools. These laws went unchallenged for many years. During that time, African Americans throughout the whole country were treated as second-class citizens. One of the ways the laws were enforced was by lynching. Lynching was defined as execution by being hanged from a rope. My mind went immediately to Mr. Harvey, the man who had been lynched in my great-grandmother's church. The Klan still killed our people that way, without fear of being arrested or tried. I've read that between the years of 1880 and 1930, over 3,744 black men and women and children, mostly Southerners, were said to have been lynched in the United States. Suddenly, I was overcome with grief. All those innocent men, women, and children died like Mr. Harvey in great pain. Why? Discovering that there were real laws and not just unwritten traditions that doomed us to that way of life made me even more depressed and frightened, because now I knew white people had been given the absolute legal right to treat us as second-class citizens.